Welcome back on stage. So, in this kind of living room here, I said yesterday, it's much more green than in my living home at home. So this is really cool. First of all, we want to get to know a little bit more private things about you. So first of all, how many days did you live without your smartphone in the last 3 years?
Wow, probably not too many, if I'm honest. Although I absolutely recognise the benefits of simply switching your smartphone off. So I'm not perhaps as endemic a user as some, but getting through a day without your smartphone is pretty tough.
Yeah, even in holidays? You use your phone in holidays?
I do. I try not to use it for work.
All right. So, Francesca, what was your childhood dream in case of a job?
My dream job?
Yeah, your dream job.
I think, the job in Barcelona was a kind of dream job because I think cities are super exciting at the moment, and the possibility to imagine the cities of the future and to put in action concrete projects and to see them scale, I think is the best thing for policymakers.
But that was not your childhood dream. I mean, when you were
a child. My childhood dream, I used to be a gymnast.
A gymnast?
Like a national gymnast. Wow. So I think, and then after my childhood dream was probably to become like a really famous dancer.
Maybe
it's like quite different.
Maybe you can show us some of your talent later. All right, Hugo. What is the most important app on your smartphone?
Oh, actually, that's quite easy. It's Google Maps. To be honest, that's the one that I find how to get around a city, even in the cities, for example, or for even driving, because it gives me all the updated traffic. So absolutely, I cannot live without Google Maps, to be honest.
Yeah, what have we done before, right?
Exactly, I don't know.
Yeah, earlier the days where we had no Google Maps. I said right now, and we were talking about the happiness of people when it comes to cities and crowded places. And yesterday, Boyd Cohen was here from IMOP, and he said, cities are for people, not for vehicles. So what do we have to keep in mind when we plan some smart cities?
Okay, well, I mean, it's a very interesting observation. I think Francesca referenced the fact that quality of life is increasingly important for cities. Cities are competing internationally on quality of life, and part of that is about regreening cities, reclaiming some of the road space for for activities other than traffic. And so, one of the things that we're doing in Forward is looking at curbside management. How do we optimize that? And sometimes, the reality is, and certainly we would accept that sometimes the right thing to do is remove parking and re-green areas. We're about providing the most appropriate mobility solution in urban centres. That's not always going to be the private car. And I'm very comfortable saying that as Ford Motor Company.
Yeah, that's really basically focused on cars again. Of which things do you take care about in Barcelona, which is not focused on transportation, let's say like that? Are there any other concepts where you say, all right, we have to use green plants there to make the people happier, we have to make sure that there's enough sunlight in the cities? I
think it's very important to understand that the correlation between happiness and technology is really a tricky one. And when you're planning a smart city, in reality, you're just redefining the future of a city together with citizens. So I think it's really important to put at the core what people really care about, which I think mainly is affordable housing, which is one of the key problems. And of course, a lot of cities are really crowded because of tourism, and it's really important to find a balance and to keep down the price of housing for people. Then you have, of course, sustainable mobility and air quality and green areas. And I think the project I show you, I think is absolutely my favorite in Barcelona, the super block, which was actually foreseen by the planners in Barcelona, like Cerdà. The first architects built the city as a grid, and the grid was like green. So we are augmenting 40 hectares of green and recuperating 60% of public space that used to be cars and parking. And this public space can become new local businesses, kindergarten, green areas, places for interaction. And I mean, yes, that's how you get to a livable city. So it's really about the quality of life, and we are measuring these kind of things. I think the data is a really interesting topic because it allows you to measure the impact of this kind of policies. And I was a bit shocked when I saw that air pollution and the correlation of death in the city, and the Barcelona super block could decrease 700 like dead people every year. And I mean, it's a lot of people, and we don't think about it how much impact on healthcare these all mobility patterns have. So I think really it is about many more things than just technology. Technology comes later, and we need to know how to use technology to enhance the life, I mean, a better life for people.
Yep. So the cities should definitely think about healthcare when they plan a smart city. Honestly, I don't see, and much more important for me, I don't feel that we have some smart city solutions today already. I can just speak for Germany. I'm traveling here a lot. What do you think, Hugo? Is it a problem that the smart city is not here already, because the cities, they have kind of a strategy, but they have a huge problem to do the realization of it?
Yeah, I think actually Francesca in the presentation covered a lot of things that we're talking about today. You see different approaches to cities, right? So you see Montreal, for example, who is sort of having like a company-driven type of approach, where you're rebuilding part of the city, driven, completely planned, like asking the question to Google, what would a Google city look like? And that's a way of doing it. I think I prefer the democratic way, maybe, although I'm a Google Maps user. It doesn't need to be everything done by Google. Yeah. I think going back to the point, I think smart cities, it depends how you look at it. I also like citizen engagement as part of it. How do you collect data? The example of Barcelona, there's also other examples, city of Boston, city of Chicago, where they're collecting also weather data, also the bumps project I think it's in Boston. I think all of that contributes to building this network layer of data and how to sort of build intelligence on top. So I think the problem, and it goes back to your comment, and I agree with it, it's not visible to the citizen directly most of the times, because it's built into planning rounds, it's built into providing maybe better routing optimization services, but it doesn't feel, okay, I live in a future city in that sense. So I think it's a little bit of a perception issue from the common citizen, I think.
Yeah, there was also a study I found, which were from Roland Berger, the consultancy, and they said there was a big gap between a strategy and the realization of it. So practically, what are the first steps? Which advices do you give people who have to start a smart city to say, all right, let's start with that one, and you can have a huge impact in case of a smart city? What are the first steps to do?
I think, again, during the last day and today, we saw, I think if we look at the sustainability objectives of the UN as guiding principles, right? So, but not all companies will be able to solve everything. So I cannot say as Fujitsu that I can help with the environmental footprint in that sense. So I would pick my own sort of role in the society. I think we are a data company. So I think what we want to enable is like companies and also like the city officials and also the citizens themselves to participate in this data economy and try to sort of build new applications. But I think we need to leave it open for people to have their own initiatives, and we as companies and officials and academia should be supporting that so that they are successful.
Do we have the right framework and tools for that when citizens should join that, or do we need some new innovative tools and frameworks?
It's very fragmented. Like Barcelona, fantastic example. If you go to other cities, not so much happening. So I think, how do you do that across the board? I think that we all need to learn as a society.
Yeah.
I think.
I mean, I would totally agree with that, and I think that this is an enormous problem, and no single stakeholder can solve that problem. So companies and other stakeholders need to work with cities. The key point being to understand the problem in the first place.
Sure.
The way we approach this is we're very sensitive about going in and telling a city which way is up. The city understands what its priorities are, and we want to understand what those priorities are equally. The way I always characterize it is we're working on a range of solutions. Fujitsu's working on a range of solutions. Other car companies, other stakeholders are working on different solutions. And the city has a range of policy priorities and problems to solve, and it's a sort of a complex Venn diagram. And somewhere within that is that intersection where we can all work together. There is no lack of stuff to do.
No.
I think collaboration is absolutely key.
We're hearing a lot of technology here at Shift, and my question is, Francesca, should we just sit back and relax and rely on the development of technology that get everything right according to mobility and its changing parameters, or do we have to take other steps to make things right?
Well, I think my whole presentation was against this. So I think that technological solutionism is nowhere the answer. I think if you start with technology and you believe you fix all the problems with an app or with technology, you are really on the wrong track. And we see it. So I think the whole thing is shifting this approach, and as they're also saying, starting with the big challenges and give really concrete target to solve those challenges when it comes to climate, the energy transition, waste management, recycling, public space. All of these need to be worked out from a policy perspective involving citizens, because we really need to regain trust. This is a big problem. Here in Europe, we feel that if we don't reshape the relationship between citizens and governments, we really lose that trust that make all this systemic shift and changing of collective behavior possible. And we see how people are disenfranchised and start voting populist leaders instead of engaging in transforming the situation that we have. So I think we have to start from that. And then we have to, of course, work a lot on infrastructure. So even my approach with data is to try to show, and that's what we've done in Barcelona, that it's very important to understand that data is a critical infrastructure of the city, because it allows you to then link it with transportation, water management, mobility. We need to fix our infrastructure, and we need to make our infrastructure fit for digital. And then, of course, we have to have the right rules and the right standards. So I keep saying that cities are really important to even fix these standards when it comes to have interoperable solutions, when it comes to set infrastructure that are open, that allow for participation between public, private, but at the core of it, it's going to be a livable city. We don't want to enter into this nightmare, of fully automated cities, but where citizens cannot live anymore. So we want to get to a point where cities, because we have no choice, we see it's full urbanizations, are good places to live. So I will go back also for, we need to think about a new pact on data, because I actually wouldn't want to live in a city where Google manages transportation, healthcare, education, all the data, and it's just like, let's give all the data to Google, they will fix it. No, we see that this is much more complex, and these companies are not fixing the problems. So we need to regain democratic control over data. Citizen data sovereignty is really important, because otherwise there is no trust, to interact, and data is about our social life, so it has all the information about what we do. And then we start understanding what are the rules and where can partnership, an ecosystem of partnership, can form in a city. And I think also we have a lot of other problems, like I'm super excited to understand more about electric mobility, but even more than that, hydrogenous fuel cells. I saw that cars are experimenting with that, and we need to understand as citizens, as people that are going to be having to shift patterns of consumption, mobility, where we are at, because this this Green Deal that we have to really make possible at the moment in Europe, shifting to renewable energy, fixing our climate emergency problem, understand. I mean, this is really important that we get everybody with us. I think you have a responsibility as an automotive industry, of course, to understand that we need to shift in that direction, but also we want to preserve good jobs and we want to preserve the competitiveness of Europe and European cities. So I mean, it's a tough challenge here. Yeah.
Thanks for pointing that out. So passionate. All right. Sometimes it's not just about the development of technology. I know there are some steps to be taken to get another new solution with a technology, but there's also another thing which can prevent a development, and that is our own mindset. So how can we help the people to get more access to this development, even with their mind? How can we help them to participate? Because you say it's very important that we engage the people. How can we help them?
I fully agree with the word participation. I think that's where it starts. I think we see, for example, the whole Berlin and Barcelona is also one of the hubs in the startup movement. And I think the startups is actually almost like demonstrate the people want to do and solve problems and participate themselves. I think the role of companies and governments in that sense, if you see about the Open Data Initiative that is out there, done by the European Commission to some extent, I think we need to sort of explain to the people what's their role, how can they use that data to make their own mindset. It doesn't need to be to create a new app. Apps don't solve the world, but I think sometimes just to analyze, understand what is my city look like for example from Ford, I love being able to see that, understand what's out there and whatnot. So openness and participation, I think, is one of the key topics that I believe to get the engagement from the individual people.
And not just focus on what is the technology about, but instead of saying what is the technology about, saying what is the value of it? What do you have?
I think that's the key. You need to demonstrate the value of the technology and the appropriateness of the technology. In our case, to the customer. So just an example, we've just introduced a plug-in hybrid electric transit van, 50 kilometers of zero emissions range, which obviously is highly relevant to the urban centre where there's potentially air quality issues. We've trialled that with geofencing so that we can guarantee to the city that when that vehicle's within a geofence zone, and that could be a congestion zone, it could be a zone around a school where there's a particular air quality issue. It's dynamic, so we can switch that around. But the important point being that we can demonstrate to the city that technology works to solve a particular policy issue, in this case air quality. Now it doesn't solve congestion, so that's a separate problem. But back maybe to the prior question about is policy intervention, can we rely on technology to solve all the problems? Absolutely not. No. We need policy intervention. We need incentives for the early uptake of these types of vehicles. We need restrictions where it's not appropriate that they're used. But ultimately we need, in the case of that particular vehicle, that's a commercial proposition to our customer. We have to demonstrate for the customer that vehicle works at least as well as a diesel vehicle. Any compromise on that and there will be resistance from the customer. So it needs to be the right solution for the city, but equally the right solution for the customer.
Before we start with the Q&A, really a quick, short round. Okay. Everyone, I know it's really tough to answer that question in a compact way, but we try it. What do we have to give up radically to shape the future right?
Oof. Oh, crikey. What do we have to give up radically? Well, I mean, I think there are compromises that we all need to make, and that may well be that for the greater good, there are instances where your mobility choices are perhaps restricted. And, we have to make those solutions attractive enough that we can all live with that. But, as populations grow, as cities become more congested, there are inevitably going to be restrictions. And I think thinking about autonomous technology, again, we have to work very closely with the policymakers to make sure that actually delivers benefits.
No.
All right.
Well, I think giving up a bit of privilege, that's definitely, because I think it was brought up also in the conversation before, and we try to really plan for everybody, to be inclusive. You have areas in the cities where people don't maybe have access to public transportation, to public buses, where they cannot afford a mobility that is not, fair. Some cities, even in Europe, are talking about free transportation in the future because it's going to be connected. And you are going to have, buses and trams like linked to bicycle lanes and taxis, and you're going to be able to have that, but it should be affordable. And definitely we have to understand that not everybody can afford, this kind of mobility services, so we need to be inclusive and plan for a population that is diverse in any possible way. But I think we should not only give away things. I think we should also gain, for instance, our rights over data, our rights to be, citizens with a good quality life, our rights as workers, environmental standards. So it's about giving away some privilege, but also gaining some rights. If we want to live in places that really, or if we want the technological revolution to benefit the majority of people and not to be just for the few lucky people that can afford it.
Yeah, nothing in the world comes for free, so sometimes we have to pay a price. Thanks for that one. So Hugo, what do we have to give up?
I think there was a comment yesterday about maybe removing cars from the streets or completely. I think in certain areas, I'm not saying that would solve all problems. I think in the US, in certain parts of the US, will be difficult. But if you think about the city center of London, city of Munich, where I live, I think most of the time people don't actually need to own their own car, and I think restricting their access can be done not by prohibiting, because if you're born in the center of Manhattan and whatnot, you probably never had the idea of even owning a car, because it's actually quite difficult. So I will not say like the Chinese to say it's impossible to own your own car, but I think as a society maybe we want to make that move. I'm a bad example. I own my own car, but
yeah, me as well.
Yeah.
All right, just have a quick look at our Q&A. I think we can do two. The first question: everything will work. I think that's up for you. Everything will work on electricity, but what about battery recycling?
Okay.
In general.
Yeah, battery recycling is key, and of course at Ford we're spending a lot of time thinking about that, because the shift towards electrification, whilst it may solve local air quality problems, significantly contribute to industry targets in terms of reducing fleet CO2 emissions. There are absolutely issues around battery recycling, and we recycle. EU requirements for vehicle recycling, we're at 95% recyclability, which I think is something that perhaps not many people are aware of. But as you move to battery technology, of course, that's a particularly difficult issue to deal with. So it has to be about life cycle benefits. It can't just be about CO2. It can't just be about local air quality impacts. It has to be about environmental impacts overall, and certainly that's a big issue. But the European Commission, I suspect, will be not letting us off the hook on that one, and that's something that the industry will have to deal with.
Yeah, that's the point where I always say we have to keep in mind that electric cars are not that far developed than, for example, combustion engines. So we have a lot of work to do. Combustion engine is over 120 years old.
Yeah,
so
we have a lot.
So much more time.
We have a lot of work to do. It's a new technology. There's all the issues around scarcity of materials and rare earth metals, and the need to recover those. I think there's an issue around as well second life for batteries. I think there's lots of conversations about how you can use, a battery at the end of its useful life in a vehicle might only be degraded by maybe 15 or 20%,
right, yeah.
And it has a second life then, and so you don't have to necessarily immediately recycle the materials. You can use it in a static application, and again, that's something that we're looking at. Can that be part of the grid?
Yes.
Can they then be used in home battery packs? So there's a range of issues beyond just simply recovery of materials, but it's a big issue for the industry. It's one we're looking at.
All right, so let's move on to the next question. I think it's the last question we can answer. Other than Barcelona, what are other cities that are leading the transition to human smart cities? What most inspired you about these cities?
Can I pick up the data privacy one?
It's working like a democratic question here, so the most voted we take
there are a lot of cities that I think are smart. I think we just have to shift our understanding of smart. I think when we think about smart, we're just gonna look like the gadgets, the tech, you know, like super fancy. No, I mean smart means that exactly is livable. There is green areas, transport work well. You have accessibility in housing. People find jobs, you know, I mean, these are good cities. I think actually Berlin is one of my favorite cities in Europe. And I think, of course, it needs investment in infrastructure and it needs to kind of shift to a bit more modernizing that infrastructure. But definitely all the ingredients are here. You have a tech talent. You are a perfect city as a technology hub. You have engaged citizens with active community. I mean, you also have technology companies that obviously can contribute to make the city really top, smart, but in a sense of democratic and with civic participation in Europe. So I'm really looking forward to Berlin to become this other example together with Barcelona.
I think Vienna is also a top scorer in this research when you look at smart cities. So it's worth a visit. So yeah, thanks for now.
And anyway, about data privacy, it should be embedded in the infrastructure. Like in Barcelona, we want cryptography to be a human right and citizens to have control over data. I think this is a shift that is absolutely necessary in the digital society. Just pick that.
So the CEO would be glad to hear that.
Well, yeah, I think we're in violent agreement on that, by the way.
Absolutely,
so that, you know, from Ford's point of view, the customer owns the data. So, you know, the embedded modem in every vehicle, well, it's a great technological feature, but ultimately the customer needs to decide whether or not they want to connect.
And also, like with any project that we do, we actually start from that, from the human-centric view. Is like, how do you own the data? That's what we are trying also a technology company to differentiate. The ownership is at the citizen, the user, the driver, or whatever.
Yeah.
I would really love to talk with you about all these topics in just one more hour or something like that, but we have to close the panel right now with our little quick round at the end. You just show me a sign if you agree or not agree with what I say right now. Fake or future? The usage of open source will decide about the success of the transformation.
Open source? I would say yes.
Why not?
Why not? Most of the cities today are prepared for the transformation into a smart city.
I would say.
Yeah, I think
to be honest,
I would say.
yeah.
Not yet. Lots of work to do.
So you say no.
Yes.
Yes. All right.
We have a
last question. Asian cities will be always pioneers of smart cities.
No.
Oh, I wouldn't.
Oh yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting.
I think there are some advantages they have, and
they're very big.
Maybe lack of democracy is one of them.
So maybe we can discuss that one backstage.
Yeah.
But for now, I say thank you very much and a big applause for John, Francesca, and Hugo. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.